I then called Eastline Police Department, and I told them what happened. I spoke with Sergeant Masick, and he told me that, he said, I don't know what I can do about that, but you need to know that this whole thing is under investigation by the FBI. And Sergeant Renshaw is the man to talk to. He's coordinating. At that point, I was very happy. Suddenly, I did not have to prove this situation of stalking. The FBI is involved. There's an investigation ongoing. Fabulous. Police are involved. They're looking into it. Now, this was October of 2014. It's the end of August 2015. And this is still ongoing. However, after getting that information in October, I attempted to get in contact with Sergeant Renshaw. I could not get him to return my calls. Finally, when I went down there, I was able to talk to him briefly. And he would not engage in discussion at all about any of it. Not at all. I told him this has to stop. It's potentially lethal. It's painful. A lot of things. And he said, "Oh, I don't know what you want me to do. I don't know what to do." Finally, I said, "Could we fill out a report?" Well, he said, "You want to do that today?" I said, "Well, can we do that?" He said, "Well, maybe I'll give it to you and you could write some words in there." And I said, "Well, I'll go home and I'll type something up and we'll attach that." Okay, he agreed. So I went home and typed up a complaint. And I brought it back. It was a few days later that I actually brought it back. And people might say, "Why did you wait so long? Why a few days?" You have to understand that I'm being stalked and tormented, and I'm doing my best to alleviate the pain that's being applied to myself. So there's a lot of things I'm juggling here, as well as trying to understand what to do here. It's a very, very lonely place when in this position. So I typed something up, I brought it down. They sat me down with Officer Como, who I'd been around before. He was a gentleman. He gave me a case number. While I'm talking to him, my cell phone rings. And it was Lieutenant Jenkins. Now, getting Lieutenant Jenkins to call me back regarding anything has been nearly impossible. I put many calls into him with no response. But suddenly I'm at the Eastline Police Department, and my cell phone rings. And it's Lieutenant Jenkins. He needs to talk to me right away. I think the moment that it rang, the moment that call came in, is meaningful. What was happening at that moment? At that moment, Officer Como from the Eastline Police Department asked me, "What does Sunless do anyways?" I'm not quite sure. He said, "I know they're into something, studio production, something like that." He looked as if he was vague about some things, vague about anything that they do. His question kind of went on for a better part of maybe a minute, as he kind of thought through and talked through what Sunless did, and I think what he wanted to hear is, what do I think that they do? What have I heard that they do? That's the feeling I got. And while I'm thinking in my mind as he's asking, how far should I go into what I've heard, my phone rang, and that was Lieutenant Jenkins. That was interrupted. Suddenly he has to talk to me right away about this whole thing. It was important. And I told him, "Well, I'm at the Eastline Police Department. I'm speaking with an officer. I'm putting in a complaint." And he said, "Okay, as soon as you're done with that, call me. Okay, and I need to speak with that officer. I need him to call me." I said, "I'll do one better. I'll give him my phone." I handed my phone to Officer Como. They talked for a minute or two, and he put the phone down. He said, "Okay, I have to break this off right now, right away. because the lieutenant needs me to call him, and I have to do it from the back. And he says he's leaving for the weekend. He needs to talk to me right away, so I have to do it right away. So I write this off. Okay. I left. I waited just 5 minutes. I attempted to call the lieutenant. He was not there. I've attempted to call him a number of times since. He's never called me back. However, he needed to talk to me right away. In talking to Officer Como, he was going to be leaving for the weekend in a few minutes. Needed to talk to him right away. So, I haven't gotten to talk to Lieutenant Jenkins since. I have attempted to get Officer Como to call me back since. I have not talked to either men. And anytime I go down to the Eastland Police Department to speak with someone, they tell me there's no one here to talk to you. Not a sergeant, not anyone. I ask when could there be someone here? They don't know. So, it appears that someone doesn't want Sunless talked about at all. Lou Heller said Sunless and Electric Boat don't work together. Talk to Sergeant San Juan, the man who stalked you. He didn't say that, but when I finally put in a complaint, I'm talking to an officer. When the question about Sunless comes up, it gets interrupted. By who? Lieutenant Jenkins. And on Lieutenant Jenkins' police report is Lou Heller, indicating he works for Electric Boat. But Electric Boat won't vouch for that, nor is he in their names directly. So, that coupled with the fact that anytime I mention things about Sunless, the people on the other end of this get nervous. They don't want this talked about. So I think it's fair to say that it's a taboo subject, what they did, what they do. With that in mind, I need to talk about what I have heard about this company, Sunless. In 2013, I became aware that the people that were stalking me worked for Sunless. A lot of them came forward with that information to others that were with them that didn't know who they were. And it became very clear that they worked for Sunless. One man's name who I used to know, I lived next door to him, his name was Ira Cohen. When I lived in Waterford at 18 Paula Lane, he lived right next door. And when his name would come up, people would get very excited on the other side saying, he's someone. If you know him, we may not be able to do this to you anymore. And I didn't really know him anymore. That was 25 years ago. But they said he was someone in management in Sunless. And that name always brought about respect on the other end of this. So as this has continued on, I got in 2013, I got to talk to quite a number of different people that worked for Sunless as they came along and joined into the group for a time. And at one time, there were people from Sunless gathering together later in 2013, and they were going to profit from all I could gather. They were going to profit off of doing some human research type of exercises on me and selling it. And they said they sold it to a company, to people that work for Electric Boat. And they were going to do this to me, and from all I could understand, they were doing this outside of their company, Sunless. They were doing it on the side. And some of these people, I talked to quite a number of them. They they appeared to be successful in that they own nice homes and all. They're living in nice homes. But they didn't seem successful as far as their behavior. Successful people usually behave successfully, and that's how they get where they are. It just didn't really wash. They were doing things that could get them sued, doing things to me. They could get identified, sued, just a lot of things. They didn't seem all that intellectual. Yet they're living in nice homes. And after a lot of talking to them, and don't forget they're all intoxicated as they come into the presence of this equipment. A lot of these people had never been around this equipment either. So they were kind of moving into the group. So they're under the intoxicating effect of it, and their voice is going out everywhere, and they don't realize that when they're having private conversations, their voice is going out. And sometimes when I would interject, they would think it's someone else in the conversation, and they would answer. So with all that going on, I began to understand a situation that I call real estate acquisition, where these people that worked for Sunless, they had these projects that they coordinated, and they would buy, a person would say buy a home, but they wouldn't live in that home. Another person would buy a home and they wouldn't live in it. But let's say they would live in each other's home for a time. And then through Sunless, money was paid for their living expense. So let's say I buy a home. I don't live in it. I live in someone else's home. Sunless pays me a living expense because we're saying that this home is necessary to rent in order for me to do this job. I pay that I write a check to the owner of the home. So that person that owns that home, they buy it. And people that work for Sunless rent it out. And it gets paid for by the government. And that person who owns that home is a Sunless employee. So if you have other employees doing the same thing, they just move people around. And people can acquire real estate. They all live in nice homes. They're not their home, but they do have a nice home. They just can't live in it. So the whole type of thing kind of launders the money trail. Essentially, they're acquiring real estate and stealing it from the government. And that was done through Sunless, through Electric Bolt. I put that together from just talking to a lot of different people that were doing it. And don't forget, they were all intoxicated. They just talked too much. Intoxicated by the electronics. I listened to the discussions and all those things. And so that was going on. And then they were gearing up, these people who were doing this, they were gearing up to do some things to me, some research, create human research data to sell for money. They were living in nice homes. Now they wanted more money to keep up with that living standard. So they were going to do that to me. And it appeared as if they got caught by their company. And that's when an investigation into that started. And they ended up keeping the whole thing going with me while that was being investigated. And with that going, I'm trying to find out what's going on. I want their company to stop this, so I'm happy to provide information. And I'm trying to understand the whole thing. So it was natural for me to talk. Whenever I brought out anything about real estate, acquiring real estate, there was a big shakeup. And so I brought it out a few times. The last time I brought it out was last year, after I found out the FBI was involved. It was about this time last year. I brought that out. And there was a huge shakeup on the other side. A huge shakeup. And people were saying, how could you bring that out now? How could you say that now? And I responded that I'm in the privacy of my own home, number one, and you're hurting me, and you're violating me in many ways. So that's how I can bring that out now. But that was a big deal when I brought that out. So that was real estate acquisition. You might say, well, that's certainly a sin against the government and against the people, but not a huge deal for someone being stalked. Beyond that, though, what did Sunless do as a company? Here's the picture I saw, and I've talked to different people at different levels. There were people at the bottom, which, and my understanding is most were contractors that worked for this company, and they worked from home. So they did not meet management. They did not see people in high places. So the very bottom level person worked at home. They got paid roughly minimum wage, but they got paid as a contractor, so there was no taxes, no Social Security. Paid by a check that did not say Sunless on it. And they had a piece of equipment manufactured by Zimmer Research, and it was handheld. It was a reasonably sized device by handheld, and it plugged into a laptop type of computer. And what they did is they pointed it through the wall at the home that they'd be living next door to, and their job was to focus it on a target and keep it on them all day. And a program would play out that would apply whatever effects were scheduled to be applied to that person. And so that employee didn't really know much about what they were doing. Their job was to just point and shoot. A person who was the program, what they called a program person, supplied the program that determined what that person was going to be exposed to. In talking to different program people, that was kind of cookbook, where they would just determine what stages they were going to take the target, the victim, through. And it would be various stages of anxiety, depression, irritability, restless leg syndrome, different types of things. Heart attacks to the heart, different types of effects, and very strong effects. When I say restless leg, I threw that in there because I've had that done to me. That Zimmer Research device, I assumed it was being used, but they may have added Tetra systems to it. I just say that to throw in, to be clear on that. But certainly anxiety and depression and irritability, heart effects, all done by the Zimmer Research equipment plugged into a laptop. The program person determined the various stages that the target was going to be taken through. And it was all advancing their anxiety, their depression, their irritability, though. To take that person to higher degrees of mental illness. And then that person would go out seeking care. They would gain a psychiatric history. And maybe when it got real bad, they would gain maybe a suicide threat or a suicide attempt, and that would maybe put them in a hospital for a time. Again, that adds to their psychiatric history. All their relatives see that. Their relatives start questioning why that person can't pull it together. They start frowning upon their behavior. That person is seeking psychiatric care, medication, bouncing from one medication to another, maybe in and out of a psychiatric hospital more than once. Ultimately, they're taken to a place where they can stand the pain no longer, and they're on the verge of suicide. When that happens, the program person moves them to the status of them being taken down hard. Taken down hard means you drive them into suicide. You force them to hang themselves, commit suicide with a firearm, a drug overdose, whatever it is. You force them into suicide. And when they do that, this person that ultimately may succumb to suicide, all of their friends and relatives will say that, we saw it coming. We saw it coming. That person couldn't pull it together. They tried, we did everything we could. The writing was on the wall. And so that person dies a death and leaves behind a death that everyone looks upon as a result of weakness, when actually they probably exhibited extreme strength, maybe heroically putting up with the torture and the torment. And they leave behind a legacy of shame and silence, because families don't want to talk about suicides. They're embarrassing. And from what I've noticed in papers, when someone commits suicide, at least from what I've seen, often it says they died after a long-term illness. And what family member is going to want that corrected? So it kept quiet. This is the picture that I saw of Sunless. This is what they did. The equipment, the Zimmer research equipment that they used, did not appear to provide any audible feedback into what was going on with the target. All they saw was a picture, and it did not appear to include any detail. So as far as detail, any feedback, any audible, visual anything for recording of data, I could not see it in that equipment that they were using. It appeared to me that their goal with that target was to kill them without getting caught. And they killed them over a number of years. Is there data associated with it? I don't know. I don't know. Does it come through other sources? Medical, insurance? I have no idea. But I have heard that it's very lucrative, that business. And the kill is what they live for. I've talked to quite a number of Sunless programmers, and it sounds very cookbook, the way that they go about killing. And they would indicate that the kill is something they live for. They would say things like, you work up to that. You work up, getting this person to the point where they're suicidal, where you think they'll take their life. And finally, you drive them into suicide, and they would say things like, yes, we got him. We got him. A job goal, a success. And I would say to them, you tortured your neighbor to death. It's murder. And they would respond to me, no, Jeff, I work for Sunless. We do this. This is what we do. It's my job. I'd say, no, it's a crime. It's a crime. Shame on you. Shame on you. It is a crime. You tortured a human to death. Shame on you. I've talked to Sunless program people who some would indicate that they've killed under 10, some of them 30 or 40 people. So it seemed over their career. So it seemed like something that's happening regularly and extremely disturbing. I talked to Sunless management through this whole thing, and as I say, at the end of 2013, it seemed like the people that were doing this to me privately for money, they weren't knowledgeable about the Tetra Systems equipment that gives you back audio and visual feedback. It's a lot more powerful, a lot more capable. They weren't knowledgeable of that, but they were going to get together and use it, and they had to learn about it. They were going to use it on me, and they were going to profit from it and sell that to Electric Boat and for profit. So I talked to quite a few of them, and it appeared as if management caught them in 2013 in the fall, and there was a big shakeup over that. And during that time, I brought out the real estate acquisition scheme and all. But when management came on the scene, again, they weren't familiar with this type of equipment that was being used by their people. And they became intoxicated. They became loose-lipped. They had meetings where they thought they were private, but because the radiation field picks up brainwaves, it sends a speech out via brainwave. Unless the speech goes into the microphone on the device, goes out via brainwave. So from a long distance away, it can pick up speech. So their meetings just went out, and these people were in this radiation field, the microwave field. So again, if I would interject, sometimes they would just answer as though it were someone, an informal gathering around that manager. And I heard at one meeting them saying that these people that did this, that violated their company, they had to be gotten rid of. And I interjected, I said, "You mean kill them?" And the man said, "Yes." He said, not all at once, a little at a time. But if they've done it before, they'll do it again. And they have to go. And that was the feeling that I got. That they had, that people that worked for that company, if suddenly they could not be trusted and they became a threat, they would be eliminated. And as that went on, that investigation went on, they brought people in that evaluated for those purposes, and they also had people that actually carried it out around. And I got to talk to some of those people and got pretty good continuity of message on what they did, how they carried it out, and so forth. And it very much smacks of organized crime, and I believe it is that, but it goes up into government levels, connections with DOD, Navy, and all, and a horrible situation. And as I say, I talked to a lot of different people, different programmers that they assigned to follow me with a group of people after that. And each program person that came in said they were going to get, when they would talk to the group, the last person wasn't going to, but this one was. They were going to force me into suicide. And they all failed. And I'm still here. So that's basically what I've heard of Sunless. Now, I've said to them, you go to Sunless Studios, because Sunless Studios is located in Waterford. Now, whenever I drive by Sunless Studios, there's never much going on there. I remember being there years ago and wondering, what do you do? Never getting a great answer, but they did some type of TV commercials, from what I understand, different video type productions. I could never get a great answer from them, so I just never pursued it. Never seemed like much went on there. No one talked about them much. I looked them up online. What do they do? It's hard to understand what they do. You read a blurb. It makes it look like they're into defense and different areas. But you read a blurb, and as you read it, the way that it's written, if you're out looking for information and you got a Sunless website and you read that blurb as a possibility of that meeting your needs and what you're looking for, when you read that blurb, you'll move on. Because you read that blurb and your reaction is, the intellectual level of that blurb is above me or beyond me. I'm too unfamiliar with this information to be able to understand what that blurb says, and you just move on. And it's not a very good website for advertising their services or understanding what they do. Not at all. It's very, very hard to understand at all what they do. And why would a company have a website if they weren't using it for the purpose of advertising? Now, in talking to people who did this to me, who said they were from Sunless, none of them would go to Sunless Studios. They were told they could never go there. And then eventually talking to management, I heard that Sunless Studios was a cover for what Sunless did. So if you hear the name Sunless, because you have all these people who work for Sunless, but they work from home. If you hear the name Sunless, you think Sunless Studios. And you think of that small place over in Waterford, but no one's quite sure what they do. If you go to the web page, the way it's written would stop you from pursuing it anymore. It's very, very hard to understand. So it seems consistent with what I heard, that they were a cover, a front business for something that was happening behind the scenes that's extremely lucrative and is organized crime. And they market, they traffic in human misery and death. And I'm told it's very, very lucrative. This is a horrible situation if that's what's occurring. I know what I've experienced. I have experienced this equipment, what's being used now. I've experienced the Sunless, the former equipment, the Zimmer research equipment. I've also experienced friends committing suicide after periods of what appeared to be effects that could have been caused by this equipment. And when they do, the papers list it as died after a long-term illness. And there are several that I can think of that I suspect were victims of Sunless, U.S. government, and this type of equipment. This is a subject that no one has wanted me to talk about. And for some reason I've been seeing that they want me isolated. They don't want the state interviewing me. They don't want anyone talking to me. And it appears that the FBI is coordinating all of this, because the FBI is leading this investigation. Last fall, the East Line Police told me that the FBI is restraining them from doing anything to stop this while they investigate. What the FBI have been investigating for roughly a year. And it's still ongoing. And so I'm wondering, what's up with the FBI? I can understand the East Line Police. Well, I can't say that I understand, but I see that some of them are involved, were involved with stalking me. Are they involved with others? I don't know. How much was their department, is their department involved? But bottom line is, they have a responsibility to stop this right here in this town. When I spoke with Sergeant San Juan last fall, and remember that he's one of the men that was involved in stalking me, but he said maybe it's time we pick these guys up. He would contact the New London office and find out. The New London office would be office of the FBI at 2 Union Plaza. Nothing came of that, so I went back to the East Line Police Department. I wanted to stop. And while I was there, first Sergeant San Juan said, would it help if we talked to the FBI together? I said, I don't know how it would help. I need you to stop these people. You are responsible for my safety.